Here are a couple of things which I thought would be interesting from an conceptual point in your teams when you're looking to deploy neuroeconomics and convert it into higher sales, higher revenues, higher customer outcomes, whatever you're looking to drive. So there are three parts. The first one is your process and your tech. Is your team uh, does the process and technology help them take actions? Is there a specific design around making individuals take action? Secondly, in that design, do you have empathy for the individual? So does it recognize that not everyone's going to be a superstar salesman, and not everyone's going to be a lazy guy like me in the process, in the team? So is the data that you have, does it understand the persona or the motivational profile or the productivity profile of an individual? And the third one is, does it trigger them to take the action at the right time? So, and I'm going to talk about these three in a little bit more specific. So, just to give you an example of what I'm saying, uh, you have you have KPIs, you have metrics. So let me just take some a sales example. Your sales team is selling widgets, and you have a process which says you got to meet X number of customers. You have to convince them. You have multiple conversations with them. If it's an automotive or a capex, high capital involved outlay kind of a product, you would need to have decisions around, and need to have conversations around commercial aspect and so on and so forth. So there'll be a defined sales process. You'll have metrics for those as well. How many customers met? How many times did you meet them? Did you talk about the product the right way? Are you doing test drives or not? Are you giving them, are there other considerations around trade-ins and stuff like that? So are you following the process consistently? For all of these, you'd have metrics, right? But how could you design for action? So for example, some of the metrics that you'd have, typically sales outcome kind of metrics, would be around saying, I need you to hit a target. Now, in sales teams where we've deployed, we've seen this in some industries. We've seen that the sales get bunched up at the end of the month. Why is that? Because there is a month-end sales target. Management needs to report, so everyone's structured around saying, okay, the last week is when I'm going to get most of my sales. Uh, for a paint company, I recall they said, you know what, 60% of our sales happen on 12 days of the year. And that sounded odd. So when we found out a little bit more, it was essentially the 30th or the last day of every month that most of the sales were clocked into the system. Automotive uh, retail sales invariably get bunched up during the end of the month. That's when dealers and OEMs essentially look at last minute discounting or freebies or whatever it is to convince their customers. In telecom, there are other examples that we have seen. So the reason I brought all these examples out were, these are not really business problems, they're behavioral problems. Why? Because your metrics are not designed for action around a consistent and I'm going to use a cricket analogy. I know a lot of I'm hoping Nashika, this is fine in South Africa that I can talk about cricket, but there's a
No,
certain run rate.
we
Yeah, there's a
stand here.
We don't have a great cricket team, though.
well, I'm going to hold off my comments on that, but sure. We, so so in sales teams, so you can, are you designing your metrics around a run rate? Okay, so can you do that? So an example that you see here is, yes, I want you to hit a target, but I want you to do it at a certain run rate. So for some customers where we've deployed, they've said, you know what, 60% of our sales need to happen by the first 3 weeks of the month. Why? Because it helps in better inventory planning and whatever else, right, in the organization. But that's an example of having a business need at the CEO level or the head of sales level, but not being able to translate it down into a behavior or an action that you want your sales guys to do for it. So that's one. Can you set up a run rate for your outcome metrics? The second one is where you're saying, I'm not giving you a target, but it's an adoption problem. So cross sell or upsell. So we had a large customer who had a problem of upselling. Why? Because it was easy to sell for the sales guys. It was the easiest thing to sell the base variant of whatever they were selling, right? Upselling would take them more energy, more effort. I'd rather not do it. I got to hit my quota, or I need to hit my, activity. So I'll just say yes. Let me just get in as much as whatever I can for now. So what in behavior terms, and BJ Fogg, by the way, talked about this, is called start behavior. The more of this activity you can do, the better it is. As an example, uh, if you're doing, I'll take an automotive thing, you can say accessory sales is an objective, and we have an automotive client where we deployed this global firm where they were looking to increase accessory sales. Yes, they did give targets on saying, out of 100, 30% needs, or 30% has to be revenues from accessories. Those targets are given to the sales guys, but are they really pushing that or not? Is it that easy for them to push? So is it better to give them a target there, or make it a start behavior, which is saying the more you do, the better? Okay. uh, the third one is activities where you want them to do on a daily basis. So these are typically compliance type of things, saying, okay, I need you every day, need you to make 5 calls, meet 5 customers, or do 10 test drives, or whatever it is. So again, it's a business objective. The more you do of this activity, the better outcomes or sales you'll get. But it's not really designed as a metric for action. It is left to saying, okay, you know what, here is a sales funnel for you. You need to do 10, 10 sales, for which you need to have, there are 3 steps in that sales process, to keep it simple. Step one, you need to have 100 leads in it. Step two, you need to have, out of those 100, maybe 50 need to be qualified. Step three, you need to have so many visits or calls or conversations to have happened. Step four is the sales outcome, the decision being made, right? Now, those are all just, currently what happens in MISs is it's every step gets a target, and then you're left managing the funnel. But you see, the problem with that fundamentally is there are different actions you want on each step for those KPIs, but they're not designed for that. And the last one, just to close this out, is a minimum threshold achievement. At least 10% of your sales need to come from high value products, as an example. So if I may just go back to the previous slide. The first step was around designing for action, like I said. So can you design your metrics to be easily converted into action by uh, your sales folks on a daily basis? The second one is empathy for action. And if you remember, I talked about the regular runner, the marathoner, and the infrequent runner. What you could also look at is that each individual gets motivated by different things, and our AI engine essentially has about 70 different personas that it looks at to figure out what drives or motivates people. So when you're looking at giving this MIS or analytics or feedback to individuals, is it being given in a way which will motivate them to act or demotivate them? And as an example, like I said, if I'm a 40% achiever, you tell me, look, the best guy in your team is hit 90% of her target today. Will that really motivate me to act? Probably not, right? And so on and so forth. So can you look at ways in which you can use technology to empathize with the performance context of the individual, as well as the motivational context? What motivates me to actually take an action on a day-to-day basis? Good managers and teams are able to do that, but not every manager is great. So now, with all those 3 things, those 2 things around designing as well as empathy, I want to bring it back to that running example that I gave and said, to look at how all these Fitbits and Apple Watches and etc., how they solve for triggering us to take those actions, right? It's the same data. If you look at it, all that your Apple Watches and Fitbits track is steps. There's a target for it saying 10,000 steps a day, which whatever or whatever you set. Uh, so it's literally a KPI. You have a target, you do some actions, those that KPI achievement happens over a period of time. But does does an app does the tool or these equipment, do they tell a marathoner saying, you took 80,000 or 200,000 steps in your marathon? Yes, it's that data point is there, but the insight it will show you is saying, hey, you know what? Third hour of your 4 hour race is where you seem to slow down a bit. That's where you need to focus on. So it's very actionable input for them. It's bite sized. You're a lazy guy like me, it'll tell me saying, you know what, it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Why don't you get up and take 30 steps or walk for 15 minutes or whatever it is? So that's essentially what Worksogo does. It's how you can use to drive all of this is if you can get use technology to do a few things, help your agents, your sales reps to figure out saying what activity to focus on, right? Depending on how they're doing, tell them at every specific point how they should improve, and if it understands our motivation, my motivation. So if I'm driven by competition, it compares me with two other people saying, if you do this two more test drives today, you'll get better than somebody else. If you're uh, if you're mastery driven, it will say, this is where you were last week, and uh, this is where you are today. If you do these two more test drives, you'll be better than where you were, so on and so forth. So it's the same data, but timely at the right point and based on what motivates me to take that action. And like a coach, if it can guide you, drive you to do the right thing on a consistent basis. And similarly for team leaders as well, can it be used to help them figure out saying which sales rep to focus on, proactively tell them these are the guys who are not doing well, and quickly tell them how to give feedback? The outcomes that you would see would be significantly better. So like I said, just to give you that context of how you can use AI and neuroeconomics to drive productivity is, and all of this is data that you would have today in your CRM structures. Which metric to focus on, what action to be taken, and framing the feedback in a way which will make them take that action on a day-to-day basis. So that's, and based on those, look at saying whether users are actually learning from and making following through on those coaching tips, etc.